In popular culture, the name George Lazenby has become synonymous with squandered opportunities or become a metaphor for forgettable, non-iconic acting efforts in other media, like George Clooney in Batman and Robin. George Lazenby appeared in just one Bond film, On Her Majesty's Secret Service, and his behavior on set was infuriating. So much so that his co-star, Diana Rigg, came up with a plan for revenge that wasn't just ingenious, it was also devastatingly gruesome. George Lazenby was born in 1939 in Australia, a long way away from his future in Hollywood. Far from a suave upbringing, his father was a railway worker and his mother was a department store clerk. It should have been a quiet childhood, except for the fact that he barely survived it. When he was just a wee little Joey, Lazenby underwent multiple surgeries that had him in the hospital for 18 months. By the end of the ordeal, he only had half of one kidney left, and Lazenby's doctors were less than optimistic about his prospects. They told the Lazenby family that he would be lucky to make it to 12. Obviously, they were wrong. In 1963, when Lazenby was 24 years old, life threw him another curveball when he fell in love with this beautiful woman who was way out of his class. Lazenby was about to make his move on this beautiful woman when she up and moved to England. Compelled by some astral force, or perhaps the force in his pants, Lazenby did the only thing that a love-struck 24-year-old could do. He moved to London to pursue his heart and track down this mysterious woman. But there was one little thing wrong. He didn't know where she was. While for most, this grand and possibly slightly creepy gesture would turn out to be a total waste of time, for Lazenby, it turned out that this was just the first step in his destiny. Instead of going home, he took up a job as a used car salesman. While there, Lazenby caught the attention of a talent scout, and in the blink of an eye, he'd become a very sought-after model. But fate still had more in store for him. Picture this. The year is 1968, and James Bond star Sean Connery has just announced that he won't be reprising his role as Ian Fleming's spy hero. The producer, Albert R. Broccoli, is desperately searching for a replacement, until one day he finds himself next to strapping model George Lazenby in a barbershop. Without a second thought, Broccoli offered Lazenby the opportunity to take a screen test for the upcoming Bond film On Her Majesty's Secret Service. There was just one issue with the whole idea. Apart from some short commercials and one bare film credit, Lazenby wasn't an actor. What's the old saying? Dress for the job you want? Lazenby wasn't confident in his acting for the part, so he dressed for it. Effortlessly debonair and easily dashing, he walked into the screen test wearing a Rolex Submariner watch exactly like Bond wore in his films, plus a Savile Row suit that the former Bond, Connery, had ordered but never collected. After the screen test, Broccoli and his co-producer Harry Saltzman formally offered Lazenby an audition. It was the chance of a lifetime, but Lazenby's response was infamous. In a move that foreshadowed his future bad decisions, Lazenby claimed he didn't like their attitude when they asked him, and initially said no. Instead, he lied and claimed he had another audition in Paris to go to. Alarmed, Broccoli demanded to know how much the Paris gig was paying him. A cocksure and defiant Lazenby told them £500 a day, a huge sum at the time. But, sure that he had a star in the making, Broccoli simply replied, "Go down to the accountant and he'll give you the money. Be here tomorrow." Well, not even George Lazenby could argue with that. The thing is, once he actually got to the audition, he went too hard. Lazenby's audition was what some might call hands-on. In fact, it was a little too hands-on. During a staged fight scene, the former model accidentally punched the film's stunt coordinator, Yuri Boryenko, square in the nose. Boryenko wasn't impressed with Lazenby's aggression, but Broccoli and the other producers were actually impressed with Lazenby's ability to display aggression, so much so that they fully offered him the role. The film's director, Peter Hunt, later said, "We wanted someone who oozed assurance, and we think this fellow has that. Just wait till the women see him on screen." Unfortunately, for all their enthusiasm, the cast and crew of On Her Majesty's Secret Service would rue the day they ever met Lazenby. While filming On Her Majesty's Secret Service, Lazenby and the other actors received their pay in cash, and he was a little too carefree with his share. In fact, the model-turned-actor actually carried his cash around in a suitcase with him on set. Seeing Lazenby with all this cash to burn, fellow actor Telly Savalas invited Lazenby to a nightly poker game with some crew members, and promptly fleeced the young man of all of his money. It was so bad that co-producer Harry Saltzman had to track down the game, enlist himself to play, and win Lazenby's money back from the crew. This stunt did nothing to help Lazenby's reputation on set. However, he did have a secret weapon. Lazenby made up for both his lack of common sense and acting skills with a willingness to do anything on set, especially life-threatening stunts. Lazenby even suggested a scene that would have James Bond ski right off a cliff before opening a parachute and gliding down to safety. They didn't have the budget to do it this time around, but it did eventually make it into 1977's The Spy Who Loved Me. Still, this wasn't enough for Lazenby, a rough-and-tumble Aussie. He didn't care if the production didn't want to fund his crazy stunt idea, so he just did other crazy stunts. According to some accounts, Lazenby broke his arm while skiing the slopes. The film's producers were irate with Lazenby for setting back the filming schedule, but they managed to film around his broken arm, but only just. In one scene, Lazenby draped a coat over his broken arm to hide it, and a henchman removed it for him when the time came because the Bond actor obviously couldn't do it himself. To add insult to injury, the actor playing the henchman in that scene was none other than stuntman Yuri Boryenko. Lazenby was all for fun and games on set, broken arms notwithstanding. One day, the debonair rogue decided to play a prank on fellow co-star Angela Schuyler. In a scene that the actors had blocked, Schuyler was supposed to write her hotel room number on the inside of Lazenby's bare thigh. For this porky prank, Lazenby and a crew member heated up a sausage and, when the time came to shoot the racy scene, Lazenby placed the sausage between his legs under the kilt he was wearing. Ever the professional, she didn't react to Lazenby's meaty joke. Sometimes, Lazenby's hijinks cost his co-stars dearly. While filming a scene with Bernard Lee, who plays M in On Her Majesty's Secret Service, Lazenby began joking around while on horseback. The roughhousing caused Lee to fall from his horse and tear open his leg on a fence. It wasn't just Lazenby's co-stars that had a problem with him. According to the actor, the film's director, Peter Hunt, was notoriously cold to him, refusing to give him any pointers on set. In fact, Hunt allegedly only spoke to Lazenby through his assistant and instructed the other actors keep a safe distance from him. Before the film even hit theaters, Lazenby's future as the British spy was already in jeopardy, as critics and audiences alike were skeptical of anyone replacing the original James Bond actor, Sean Connery. But this didn't matter much to Lazenby's own agent, who was adamant that the whole Bond franchise would soon be Hollywood history. Little did they know that it would instead make Hollywood history. After filming, Lazenby returned to Australia for some rest and relaxation. At the time, he was supposed to follow up on Her Majesty's Secret Service with The Man with the Golden Gun. Yet, despite this, all anyone heard was Lazenby badmouthing the Bond franchise, complaining that the producers made me feel like I was mindless. As the film premiered, Lazenby, sporting a very un-Bond bushy beard and long hair, told the world, "Bond is a brute. I've already put him behind me. I will never play him again." A scorched earth move from beginning to end. The world reacted accordingly. After giving up the opportunity of a lifetime, accurate or not, everyone was now labeling him as difficult, and no one wanted to touch him. Eventually, he fell in with a beatnik crowd and tried his hand at experimental filmmaking with 1971's Universal Soldier, acting in, producing, and partly directing the film, to zero fanfare. It was a flop, and Lazenby was lower than ever. He did get one thing out of it, though. George Lazenby met Chrissy Townsend on the set of Universal Soldier and fell hard for her. After filming, the two went sailing around the world without a care in the world for months on end. But at the end of their world tour, they discovered Townsend was pregnant, and Lazenby's priorities abruptly shifted. In a wake-up call that he probably should have had years ago, Lazenby realized he needed to settle down, marry Townsend, and start making a living for his new son, a boy they named Zachary. Another one of the reasons Lazenby turned down Bond was because his producers said there's a guy called Clint Eastwood doing movies in Italy, getting $500,000 a month for doing a Western. They said you could do that, so I didn't feel like I was losing the $1 million. Sadly, during his time in Italy, instead of grand westerns, he could only find work in low-budget movies, which is how he landed the lead in the 1972 Italian film Who Saw Her Die. Desperate to prove himself, Lazenby lost 35 pounds for the role, though he did earn some critical kudos in the process. But kudos don't pay the bills, and with all his sailing around the world and not making money on films, he had already blown through his entire salary from On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Lazenby claimed that the stresses of playing Bond, not to mention the ostracization that came after, had driven him into no fewer than 2 mental breakdowns and ignited his alcoholism. Throughout it all, though, Lazenby never admitted regret to leaving Bond behind. Conversely, he said if he had stayed, he'd be locked up by now. You need mental conditioning to play Bond. Starting from the bottom once more, Lazenby turned his eyes to a new endeavor, and in 1973, Lazenby traveled to Hong Kong to meet with legendary martial arts star Bruce Lee about making a movie together. Instead, the very day that he was supposed to meet Lee for lunch to chat about the production was the day that Lee collapsed and infamously died at the young age of 32. Despite this bad break, Lazenby did manage to impress the martial arts world in Hong Kong. They probably heard about his love for skiing off of cliffs. Lazenby would go on to star in several martial arts films between 1974 and 1976, but his bad luck followed him throughout his tenure in Hong Kong. On the set of 1974's The Shrine of Ultimate Bliss, Lazenby had an allergic reaction to shampoo at his hotel, and the suspicious shampoo caused temporary alopecia. Fortunately, it all grew back just in time for 1975's The Man from Hong Kong. The former James Bond star insisted on performing a stunt where his jacket catches fire. The stunt went horribly wrong when he was unable to get the blazing jacket off in time, and it scorched parts of his arms before the crew could put it out. Eventually, Lazenby returned to Hollywood following his Hong Kong stint, but he struggled so hard to find work that he had to take out an ad in Variety offering his acting services. He later told a reporter, "If I could get a TV series or a good movie, I swear I'd do it for nothing." There might have been a good reason for Lazenby's inability to find work in Hollywood. Although everyone was aware of his general difficult reputation, Lazenby believed there was one man in particular closing all the doors for him: Bond co-producer Harry Saltzman. As Lazenby remembered it, he said he'd make sure I never got another job. But Saltzman wasn't the only one. Albert Broccoli had also given Lazenby his start in the industry, and Broccoli held much the same grudge as Saltzman. When Lazenby returned to Hollywood in 1978, Broccoli called him "my biggest mistake in 16 years. At another point, Broccoli sneered about Lazenby that one could wish he had less bravado and more charm. For a long while, Lazenby's union with Chrissy Townsend was the best thing he had going. Not only was her family wealthy and able to help support him during the lean years, but after their son Zachary, they had another child together, a girl they named Melanie. Unfortunately, Zachary was diagnosed with a malignant brain tumor at a young age, and passed at the age of 19. By 1995, the heartbreak was too much for Lazenby and Townsend, and they filed for divorce. Years later, in 2002, Lazenby thought that he might have found love once again, and he married former tennis professional player Pam Shriver. The marriage lasted longer than Lazenby's tenure as Bond, but that's not saying much. Shriver filed for divorce in 2008, citing irreconcilable differences, although they did have 3 children together. Despite only playing the suave spy once officially, Lazenby has made a number of appearances as 007 unofficially. By this, I mean times where Lazenby would play a spy that was James Bond in all but name. In 1983, the same year which saw the Battle of the Bonds, Lazenby appeared in The Return of the Man from U.N.C.L.E. as a spy driving the iconic Aston Martin DB5 with an aptly named license plate. I guess it helps that The Man from U.N.C.L.E. was inspired by the 007 books and films, and Bond book writer Ian Fleming even served as a consultant, so at least this one got the creator's blessing. The tongue-in-cheek episode, Diamonds Aren't Forever, of the TV series The New Alfred Hitchcock Presents, saw Lazenby don the white jacket once again, playing a spy named James who orders a martini from the bar and asks that it not be stirred, obviously referencing Bond's drink and preparation of choice. Even as late as 2012, a much older Lazenby appeared on the Canadian sketch comedy series This Hour Has 22 Minutes in a skit entitled "Help, I've Skyfallen and I Can't Get Up." But probably his most surprising Bond-esque role was one he landed prior to his appearance as James Bond in On Her Majesty's Secret Service. 4 years prior, in a little teaser, or perhaps a really coincidental stroke of fate, the Aussie landed an uncredited part in the Italian film Espionnage Intangier, a spoof of the popular James Bond films at the time. Clearly, there needs to be an asterisk next to Lazenby's one-time Bond title. Even though he only played the spy once, George Lazenby's questionable acting abilities, on-set shenanigans, disdain for the role after the fact, and parody roles aren't his only noteworthy additions to the James Bond legacy. There was also extreme animosity between Mr. and Mrs. Bond behind the scenes. In On Her Majesty's Secret Service, none other than Dame Diana Rigg plays the main love interest and Bond girl opposite Lazenby, but their relationship quickly soured. Rigg didn't take to Lazenby's macho man antics or his apparently high and cocky opinion of himself. According to Rigg, Lazenby was simply unwilling to take any advice from the more seasoned producers while on set. She once said the headstrong actor couldn't bear to do an apprenticeship under the veteran crew. As time went on, their feud reached ridiculous proportions, with Rigg at one point saying, "I can no longer cater for his obsession with himself. He is utterly, unbelievably, bloody impossible." Not one to be messed with, she made sure he got some karma for his arrogance on set and came up with a plan for revenge. Allegedly, Rigg used to eat fistfuls of garlic before scenes in which she had to kiss Lazenby. In the middle of an interview, Rigg once yelled out to Lazenby, "I'm having garlic for lunch, darling. I hope you are too." In the years that followed, Hollywood insiders tried to play down the tensions between Rigg and Lazenby. They claimed that the whole garlic stunt was just a joke blown out of proportion. The truth, however, may be much different. Rigg's later comments showed that the hatred was real, stating in an open letter that, "I agree that by the end of the film most of the crew were hostile, but only because of your extreme behavior." Time has been kinder to Lazenby than he could have hoped for. On Her Majesty's Secret Service remains a Bond fan favorite. His wooden performance has aged well, and years after the film's release, Lazenby got the approval of the only person whose opinion really mattered. While eating at a restaurant, Sean Connery approached him and, in true Bond fashion, he had just the right words to say. The legendary actor calmly shook his hand and told Lazenby, "You were good." If you enjoyed this Factinate video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more incredible stories. Want a say in who we cover next? Join our membership program through the link in the description for exclusive perks. Your support means everything to us. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.